1. A bit about me. I'm both a skeptic and a believer. I have seen a spirit follow me across the planet and even talked to it at one point. It is my protector. I know how it sounds, but it's comforting thinking there is something looking out for me. Anyway, I also know that people are imaginative. Stories are exaggerated, and people bend the truth. I'm not a native English speaker, and hero class field trips include trips to a haunted house where ghosts live, and rocks and mountains where elves live. We are taught to believe in the paranormal. When two of my friends, friend 1 and friend 2, got their first apartment together, it became our go-to hangout place. I spent a lot of my free time there. I remember the day they first took me and another friend to the apartment. The moment I stepped into it, I felt this overwhelming sense of fear and anger. I immediately knew there was a spirit in there, not with the best of intentions. One day, as I was helping friend 2 move, we were carrying his bed, and as soon as we entered the apartment, the door immediately shut super hard, and we both jumped. I knew it couldn't have been the wind, since I stood an inch from the door and would have felt some wind. Sometime later, they had fully settled in, and I was in the kitchen alone, when I heard the loudest bang coming from behind me. And when I turned around, I saw the smoke detector fall to the ground and land on the other side of the room from where it had been in the ceiling. And it wasn't glued to the ceiling or anything, it was screwed on. It also didn't bounce, since I would have heard it. Every time I was alone in a room in that apartment, I could feel someone behind me. Also, whenever I'd enter an empty room that didn't have lights on, I could see in the corner of my eye a woman in her 30s or 40s, in a fully white wedding dress. When friend 1 was leaving the apartment, he took his stepfather, who has his third eye open, and he saw exactly what I'd seen without me ever telling them what I saw. At some point, we were all chilling in the living room watching TV, when we all heard footsteps run from the kitchen to friend 1's bedroom. Mind you, there are 4 doors between those places, and each and every one of them opened and slammed shut in unison with the footsteps. At that point, I had had enough, and asked him what the fuck that was. He said, completely calm, "It's the ghost." So they apparently knew it was there. The ghost was scary at first, but it was so active and walking around closing doors that it became a roommate. We even started to tell it off when it was making too much noise late at night. Like a door would slam shut, no windows, doors, or anything open, at 2 a.m., and we'd go, "Stop, that was so loud, it's 2 a.m., go to sleep." I had the unfortunate perception of not living there, but spending a lot of time there, and saw these 2 best friends begin to hate each other. They were always annoyed, and angry friend 1 worked an 8 to 4 job, however. He could barely sleep and almost got fired. The other friend didn't sleep at all and stopped showing up to work, leading to him actually getting fired. It got to the point of whenever I came to their apartment, friend 1 was always trying to sleep in the living room, because he didn't want to sleep in his own bedroom. The other one was doing anything he could to stay out of reality. One day I get a phone call from friend 1, saying the other one had just packed up and left. He had literally taken everything except his bed, and he was going to get that tomorrow. I then talked to him, and he said that he was going insane in that place, and that if he didn't leave, he'd either kill himself or friend 1. I went back there a couple of times so that my friend wouldn't be alone in that apartment while he looked for another place to stay. I could see him turn pale, angry, and depressed. I told him to sleep in his car, and that worked. You could explain all the physical things that happened in that apartment, the doors and footsteps, but what has me convinced that there is something in that apartment is that I saw 2 happy go-getters transform into sleepless husks of what they used to be within 4 months. Luckily, they are both alive, and I talk to them still, and I can tell they are doing much better. They haven't spoken properly since one of them left, but we all met again a few weeks ago, and I could see a glimmer of what their friendship used to be come back. You could chalk all this up to drug use, but the incidents happened while I was completely sober. In fact, the only time I didn't notice something was while high. The most skeptical person you'll find, a third friend, admitted to not wanting to go there because of a bad feeling he had. 2. I'm new to the field of healthcare, and I've been working in a nursing home for about 6 months now. I don't know if I necessarily believe in ghosts, but I definitely believe in energy. I've asked lots of my coworkers to share with me all their stories about our campus. I figure so many people have died here over the years, there's bound to be stories. I've heard the garden variety little girl visits residents before they're about to die, and cold spot on the 3rd floor near the elevator stories. But nothing that really scared me. One night on a slow 3rd shift, me and a coworker used that energy field TikTok filter to see if we could find ghosts in the dining room. And there were some creepy impressions on the chairs of residents who died. Around the time my first residence on hospice was dying, the nurse was going over death procedures in report. A lot of us were new, so she was filling us in. She told us to always speak to the body as if it could respond, even if they hadn't spoken in days, even if they were dead. We assumed that it was a sign of respect to the resident and family members that might be in the room. The nurse clarified that it was because they believed the body might still be able to hear us. I was surprised that the nurse would state something of such subjective matter, but she went on to tell us that this is the stance that our company takes. As far as they're concerned, ghosts are real. It was strange to hear a company acknowledge the existence of ghosts. We were also told not to open the windows in a dying resident's room because it might go against the family's wishes. I asked for clarification, and the nurse explained that opening the windows lets out the spirit, and sometimes the family want the spirit to hold on. She said the co-workers had even been written up for doing that before. I kept that in the back of my mind. Over the next few weeks, the resident on hospice deteriorated. They'd been bedbound for almost a month. We positioned them every 2 hours to reduce bed sores. Eventually, they stopped responding to cues. They hadn't eaten for more than a week. They were given a morphine drip for pain because they couldn't take it any other way. But they were still holding on. The family had been spending the entire month with them on shifts, and we kind of got the impression that the resident didn't want to pass in front of their family. The family went to visit the resident's wife's grave, and the nurse told us apparently they'd asked the spirit of the wife to return to the resident's room with them and give them permission to pass. They still held on, and the family all went home for the first night since they went on hospice. I had that resident's care for the night, and I briefly thought about opening the window. Since they were unable to follow cues, I had another co-worker in assisting me. I asked her if she's ever opened a window on a resident, and she said no. But she told me the story of another co-worker of ours who had. Apparently, they spoke to the resident and told them it was okay to leave, opened the window, left the room to put some towels in the wash, and when they came back, the resident was dead. I asked her if she thought we should, knowing we would get in trouble for it. After all, I'd been told about it with the explicit directions not to. But we decided to open the window. I did it, and my coworker spoke to the resident. I was surprised at how affectionately she spoke to them, because even when they were more active, none of us were particularly close with them. She told them their family loved them very much, and they'd be taken care of and safe, that it was okay for them to let go, and we just didn't want them to be in pain anymore. We left the room for a moment, thinking they might want some privacy, and returned after about a minute. It was a cold night out, so we didn't want too much cold air to come into the room and actually harm the resident. They were still visibly breathing, so we shrugged and continued care. After we were done with the room, I continued about my night. Not an hour later, the nurse told us that they'd passed. I still don't know what I believe, but it was wild for my company to take such a strong position on ghosts, and then for their specific lore to be backed up in real life. I guess ghosts can't go through walls. 3. The following story is from the same author as story number 2. I'll set the scene first, since it's necessary to explain how I do not believe what I saw was a living person. Our nursing home is basically one giant hallway with many rooms on both sides. I was exiting one resident's room after completing care very late at night. About 10:30 p.m. After 8 p.m., half of the fluorescent lights shut off, so this end of the hallway was very dark. I was near the end of the building, with the only 2 rooms to the right of me, and the rest of the building to my left. After cares are completed, you're supposed to shut the residence door, and since most people like to go to bed earlier than the room I was in, all of the doors were already shut. All of the doors are fireproof, rated for up to 1.5 hours, so they're very large and heavy doors. It's quite difficult to shut them without making a sound, and we often have residents yell at us if we accidentally slam the doors too hard. They also have a tendency of closing on their own and not staying propped open. With it so late, most of second shift had already left for the night. It was only me and 2 other PCAs in that side of the building, and I knew the relative location of each one. As I was maybe about 5 feet from the door, I saw something walk in front of it in the hallway, pacing from left to right at a medium pace. They were about 5 feet in height, hunched over, and looked to be wearing dark blue. As the hallway was so dark, I couldn't make out their face or any details. Nothing struck me as off about the encounter at first. I simply thought it was a coworker because one of us was wearing dark blue scrubs that night. As soon as they'd passed by the door, I rushed up to it and peeked my head out to see who it was, out of curiosity. But there was no one there. The end of the hall is directly to my right, so there was nowhere they could have gone. All of the doors to the other rooms were closed, and they couldn't have ducked into a room and shut the door that quickly or quietly. They simply walked past the door and disappeared. I was very shaken up but didn't say anything and went about my night, trying to find some kind of rational explanation for what had happened. Later on, my supervisor came up to me with wide eyes and told me she'd felt something. I still haven't told her anything of what I saw. Basically, she had gone into one of the rooms on the right of where I saw the apparition, a while after I'd finished care, and she felt like someone was staring at her the whole time, to the extent she kept turning around to see if someone was there. This particular room is the last room in the hallway, and has the rare feature of having 2 exterior walls, being on the corner of the building. Twice as many windows as other rooms. I shared with her what I saw. We were pretty spooked out, so we stayed close together for the rest of the night. Around that same time, the resident in between the room where I saw the apparition and where my supervisor felt like she was being watched started to decline and eventually passed away. Before his death, he would tell us he saw his late wife watching him from outside of his window. 4. So this happened back in 2017, and other than a couple of people in my family, I never really shared this because till this day, I can't come to a rational conclusion of what exactly happened. A little background on myself. I do come from a somewhat religious family, so rule numero uno was never dabble in any occult games or anything that had to do with ghosts. So naturally there was always a curiosity as a kid of what could be out there, but for the most part I could only imagine through stories from my elders, and whatever I saw in TV and movies. But that all changed on one August night in 2017. Now to put this in perspective, I'm 21 years old, around 6 feet tall at the time. It was a pretty calm night, and I was spending it at my grandma's house before I headed back to my school for my senior year of college. So it's around 2 a.m., and I'm pretty much done for the night. I lay down on my right side, facing the wall, and closed my eyes to go to sleep. So now I'm in that transition stage of wakefulness and sleep, and suddenly I hear a tap. Now usually I would just ignore stuff like that, because I'm a pretty heavy sleeper. To give a quick example of how heavy a sleeper I am, when I was 9, the sprinkler system in my house went off and I slept through the whole thing. It wasn't until my parents woke me that I realized I was soaking wet, and I initially had thought it was raining, and I had left the window open, because this was when I lived in Florida, and this was a normal experience for me sleeping close to the window. But anyways, for some reason this tap woke me out of my sleep. So I tried ignoring it, but it wouldn't stop. I then opened my eyes to see where the sound was emitting from, and as soon as I lock eyes with the spot on the wall where it's coming from, it stops. So I'm like, well, that's weird, but whatever, I'm trying to sleep. I close my eyes, and then the tapping starts again, so I look at the spot, and then it stops again. In my head, I'm like, is this a coincidence, or is there something in the damn wall messing around? At first I thought maybe it was a bug I couldn't see, but I was sadly mistaken. So after locking eyes with the spot for a couple of minutes, and not hearing anything, I just turned to my left side and closed my eyes to sleep. Then it starts again. Now I'm getting creeped out and turn around to the spot real fast, and it stops. I'm like, what's happening? Is there something toying with me right now? After that, it was like clockwork, because now I was keeping my eyes open, looking away from the spot with the noise, and it would start, and then I would look back, and it would stop. So now I get the sense that whatever the hell is making this noise knows I'm looking at it, and it's letting me know that it knows I'm looking at it by continuing to tap and stop whenever I look in that proximity of the noise. So I close my eyes, and I feel myself getting goosebumps, and my eyes get watery and tears begin to flow. Which is weird for me, because nothing really too crazy happened, and I'm not someone who gets teary-eyed often. Maybe as a kid, but I'm long past that era. So in my head I'm thinking, I'm having a real physical reaction to this, and I don't know why since it's just happening. So now my mind is racing, and the fear and panic just take over me, and just lay there, frozen, till I somewhat snap out of it and call my mom, who was at her other house. I explain the situation to my mom, and she gives me some rational explanations of what it could be. So my mind begins to calm, and I notice the tapping stopped. Unfortunately, after a few minutes on the phone, I hear a scratching noise next to me, and then very faintly next to my ear I hear a woman's giggle. The vibe felt bad. As soon as that noise started, I suddenly felt a cold breeze and chill run through my body. I started freaking out, and then my body begins to tense up, and I start having some kind of muscle spasm. All I could remember is that I could barely control my fingers, arms, legs, and toes. My panicking wakes up my grandma to find me tweaking in my bed, and now she's panicking, but thank goodness as soon as she turned on the lights to the room, I was able somewhat to snap out of it and run to her room. I just jumped into her bed and remember feeling cold like a block of ice, and I couldn't stop shivering. Mind you, it's a hot summer night. Eventually my mom comes over and they take me to the living room. As I'm sitting down, I can see the room I was in, with the door still open but the lights were off. I don't know why, but whenever I stared into the dark doorframe, I began to have that same feeling of fear and coldness again, and even began crying a little, and forced him to close the door because I felt as if a presence was there, standing in that doorway peering at me through the darkness of that room. Eventually I calmed down and went to the doctor, because we didn't know what actually happened to me, but of course, everything was fine, which only confirmed my suspicion that what had happened to me was a reaction to whatever was in that room, and to this day, I still don't have an answer. But luckily for me, the next day I went back to my college dorm for the new semester. I never felt like such a wimp in my life, but I guess no matter how old you are, at the end of the day, fear has no prejudice. Side note, the bed I slept in was old and gifted to my grandma. One time, late at night in the kitchen, I heard a growl behind me. Another time, I had a night terror where an old lady chased me through a forest and eventually caught up to me and grabbed my ankle with a hot burning sensation. I woke up screaming and felt my ankle was warm and a little red. Scariest dream of my life. These all happened on different days, but all in the same house. 5. This happened to me about 4 years ago. I haven't felt comfortable sharing this before because, in the end, I'm not really sure what happened, and I'm not really sure if it counts as anything. But I think about it often, and I think it would be good if someone else heard it. I had just moved back home with my parents in Mexico from the US. I was going through some harsh moments, and I needed to be with my family. The town where I moved back to can barely be considered a town. I think of it as more of a larger village. It's located between 2 big rivers and surrounded by thick forest. The main source of income is agricultural and farming, and homes there are usually attached with big pieces of land to cultivate. There is one main road that passes through and connects several more of these villages. This road is made up of cliffs and sharp curves. There is no straight stretch of road for at least 20 miles from my town. We don't have a lot of through traffic. It's a small, lonely, but beautiful town. One day my parents needed to make their way to a bigger town close to us, about 45 minutes, to purchase some supplies. I decided to stay behind and take care of my little sister since she didn't want to go. She was inside watching TV in the living room, and I made my way out to the driveway to attempt to make a phone call. The driveway had a tall, windowless metal gate and was surrounded by tall concrete walls, about 9 feet tall. In fact, concrete walls surrounded all of our house, the front patio, the backyard, and the driveway. The house was well secured inside of these walls, but it was also impossible to see the street, or anything beyond those walls for that matter. I gave up on the call since it was a losing battle trying to get any reception there, and sat inside one of my dad's cars, watching a show I had downloaded before leaving the US. About 20 minutes went by before I heard something like a growl. I paused my phone to hear better, but I was not able to hear whatever sound that was again, so I dismissed it. About 40 minutes passed before I heard it again, and I realized it was definitely a growl, a loud growl. I paused my phone, got out of the car, and got closer to the main gate where I believed the sound was coming from, and suddenly it howled. Now, I had lived in this town for many years before. I am very familiar with sounds from coyotes and dogs. But this was different. The sound made my skin crawl. I felt the deepness of the howl in the pit of my stomach. It sounded like this animal was the size of a bull. It froze in front of the gate, then it howled again, this time louder. My heart was racing at this point, and a desire to open the door and look at this beast outside was immeasurable. The one thing that was stopping me was the reminder that my sister was inside the house. Remembering my sister, I ran inside and checked on her. The TV was blaring, and she was oblivious to any sound coming from outside. I ran back outside and got close to the gate again. I laid flat on the ground and attempted to see under the gate for paws or hooves or something, but saw nothing. A minute passed in silence, and then it howled again, but this time I heard it behind the house. I felt my opportunity to see this creature fading, and while I weighed my options, the howl came again. This time it sounded a mile away. That was the last time I heard it. I remained outside for the next hour or so, panicked and quite frankly a little weirded out. I was too afraid to go outside, but I really wanted to know if it was still out there and if anyone else driving nearby saw it. Finally, my parents arrived back home. As soon as they were out of the car, I asked my mother if she had seen anything, or maybe heard of someone who saw anything weird. She said no, but asked why. Now this is where the wild part begins. I told her everything, what I heard, what it sounded like, and where I heard it. I might have expected her to mock me, laugh at me, or simply dismiss me. However, I was not ready for what happened next. Her face became serious. She asked me some questions about it, like at what time it happened, if I had seen it, and if my sister heard it too. Then she forbade me to go outside unaccompanied. She explained that evil was most likely lurking around me because of my sadness. She made sure all of the doors were locked, and she and my dad went out to secure the property with the rifle in hand. I was speechless. I guess at that time I could have asked my mom to explain what was happening, to have her explain to me where this fear was coming from, but I think part of me was terrified, and even slightly embarrassed that my own mother could believe there was something evil out there. Over the course of the next few days, I was not allowed to go out alone. However, the interesting part is that people started reporting sightings of this beast. One had seen it in his property. He claimed that the beast was the size of a bear, and he ran from there before it spotted him. Our closest neighbor said he saw it when he was driving near our property at night. He said this beast was furry and gray and the size of a bull. Another day, my mother was told that cattle was missing from a farm nearby. It was blamed, of course, on the beast. That afternoon, my father came back saying that a hunt party was forming within the next couple of days to kill it. However, the next morning, the beast was spotted in the next town over, and a few days later, it was seen a few towns over. Little by little, making its way further away from us. Every day we heard less about it, until finally we heard of it no more. It was a few weeks later that my mother felt comfortable with me going out alone, not without her reminding me to be careful every time. I left Mexico a couple of weeks after that. So this is my story about something supernatural that I experienced, where I never saw anything, and nothing really happened. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 276. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd appreciate it if you shared the video around with all your spooky friends and family, anyone you know who might appreciate a good ghost story. Alright, let's see this. Oh, it's Friday the 13th. I'll have to dust off my hockey mask. I do have one. Okay, I think tomorrow is our next birthday shout-out. So let's just jump straight to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Alright, as it is Friday the 13th, your favorite horror movie that many other people don't like, right? So it doesn't have to be your absolute favorite. It's just one you really like that other people seem to, kick the shit out of. For me, as it is Friday the 13th, appropriately, it's Jason X. It's cheesy, it's stupid, but my goodness, I love it. Jason Goes to Space. Good stuff. What are yours? Please leave them in a comment below. Or possibly turn your phone upside down and leave it in a comment above. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.